Whoa, buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
Sounds just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and live across the state of Alaska on your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. Good morning to the big radio show. That's it right here, the Michael Dukes Show, where we tackle trends and things that are happening here across the state of Alaska. We appreciate you being part of it today and look forward to you sticking with us this morning as we get ready to dive into things here and get ready to go for this beautiful Monday. Looks like it's going to be, well, down here anyway, on top of the world in Homer. Looks like it's going to be a beautiful day. And we're hoping that you'll start it here with us this morning. On the program today, we're waiting right now for Ben Carpenter to join us, former Representative Ben Carpenter, who is now the host of the Must Read podcast. He's going to be coming on board, and we're going to do a deep dive into the grand jury system here in the state of Alaska. Now, this should be interesting because there have been plenty over the last 2.5 years, I guess. There have been plenty of allegations of corruption and outright malfeasance in regards to the grand juries here in the state of Alaska. And so I thought since Ben has been following this pretty closely since his days as a legislator, that we should bring him on and have and take a close look here, just a close look at what's happening and get into it and figure out what exactly is going on. What is the place of the grand jury in the whole scheme of things, and what's going on. So we're going to dive into that here with Ben Carpenter here as soon as he joins us here in just a moment or so, and we'll see where we go from here. And then, and that'll be for the full 2 hours of the program today. This week already starting to fill up as well. Of course, tomorrow on the program, we're going to be chatting with Brad Keithley and Chris Story. They'll come on board to share with us their thoughts. Brad, of course, with the weekly top three. And then Chris is going to come on, and I might have Chris come on a little bit early to give us an update on on his Fair Tax Act, which, for those of you who don't know, is his push to try and get a California-style Prop 13 tax passed here in the state, where you would your property tax value, or taxable value, I guess I should say, would be locked in at the purchase price with some extra bells and whistles on it. But it would be a good way to lock things in and prevent you from being basically taxed out of your home. And so that's what we're going to be looking at hopefully on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we're going to be talking with Allison Gaylord from the Alaska Beauty Peony Co-op, working on some other guests as well for Wednesday already. Then on Thursday, David Ignell is going to be joining us for Must Read, and he's going to be talking with us about this the peculiar case of the Ketchikan police police chief, I guess, not commissioner, but police chief. And the interesting situation with Attorney General Treg Taylor. If you haven't been following this story, it's over on Must Read. David wrote about this last week, and it is, well, it's a fascinating look at what's going on. And it also utilizes and is part of this whole grand jury discussion as well, because the grand jury was involved in that, not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. So we're going to talk with David Ignell then. And then on Firearms Friday, Professor David Yamane is going to be coming on. And he is he's the author of the book Gun Curious, which I think he owes me a quarter. I don't know. Anyway, he's a liberal who has been writing about guns and has become a gun part of the gun culture in regards to that. And we're going to talk about some of his latest writings on that as well. So the week is already shaping up to be a good one. I hope you are. I hope you're all ready to go and got everything you need there on that, and are ready to get with the program this week and hang out with us every morning from 6 to 8 a.m. Good morning to all of you here in the 6 o'clock hour. We like to call you the 6 o'clock club. It's, it's kind of like Whose Line Is It Anyway, where the rules are made up and the points don't count. This is just more bragging rights than anything else. You don't get anything for being a 6 o'clock club member other than the pride of knowing that here you are ready to go. And we're ready for you to be part of it. So welcome and be a proud member of the 6 o'clock club. We love having you here, and we appreciate you being part of it with us here this morning. As we wait for Ben Carpenter to come on board, not quite sure what the holdup is here yet, but I thought I would do some of the breaking news from around the state while we take a look at this, because there is some there's some crazy stuff going on out there. First and foremost, I guess we could start off with the Peninsula Streaker. The Peninsula Streaker, which so I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but I just sometimes you're just like, what is going on in the world? This madness, absolute madness. It was a chaotic scene on Friday while most of the crowds from Anchorage were zooming down to the Kenai for a weekend of dip netting and other things. An Anchorage man made a different kind of a splash. Multiple 911 calls came in to the troopers about an adult male running into traffic, striking vehicles, and stripping down in the roadside pullout. Troopers from Seward and Soldotna eventually were able to locate the individual in a nearby vehicle. The man, identified as 29-year-old Achua Johnson of Anchorage, was arrested on 3 counts of first-degree indecent exposure, as well as charges of 4th-degree assault and disorderly conduct. He's now been transported to Wildwood in Kenai, where he is being held without bail pending arraignment. Unlike the thousands peacefully casting nets for wild salmon, Johnson became another wild roadside attraction in Cooper Landing. That was the Suzanne. She's a wordsmith, man. I'll tell you what. But I mean, it's just like, what? It's so weird, man. It's so weird. That was and then of course in Anchorage this weekend, Friday and Saturday, Friday night, early Saturday morning, 2 shooting events inside of Anchorage. One at a baseball field, the other included 4 people being shot in downtown near 4th and G Street. Just kind of a crazy. So I'm so glad I don't live in South Central anymore. I mean, that part of South Central. That, I guess I'm Southern Peninsula. So you know what I mean. I'm glad I'm not there anymore, because wow, some crazy stuff there. So that's a quick peek. We'll get into some of these stories tomorrow as we get through it between Brad and Chris. Meanwhile, Ben Carpenter has joined us, and we're ready to dive into our education on the grand jury, the intent of it, what was it intended to do, where's it going, and what about all these allegations of corruption and malfeasance and everything else. It's going to be a full day here. So let's jump right into it with former Representative Ben Carpenter, who's now the host of the Must Read podcast. He joins us this morning. Good morning, Ben. How are you, my friend?
Good morning. I'm doing very well. I'm hoping that my audio and video is coming across fine for you.
You're doing okay, my friend. You're doing okay. We're ready to go.
Very good.
And I'm looking forward to this. I've actually been thinking about this on and off all weekend. I wanted to, this is something that's important, I think, to get into. Ben, you and I first started talking about this. Well, I guess it was probably two and a half years ago. You were still in the legislature, and it was one of the things that you were, focusing on quietly in the background. You had a lot of other things going on, but I think our first conversation over it was, this is something you said you're really looking into and you're diving into to get educated and to figure out what's going on. And of course, here we are 2 years later, and now we're seeing more and more come out about this. Let's get started. The grand jury, for most people who hear this, they probably don't really understand what the grand jury is, what its function is. Can you give us some background here?
Yeah, it's absolutely right. And I think that's a very easy statement to make and be truthful on the matter. People don't know what it is unless they've served on it. And even if they've served on it, they don't really know what the authorities are, because the district attorney is the one that's telling them what the grand jury is going to do.
Right.
So they don't really know. Unless they've done their own homework, they don't really know. You must go back to the state's founding, and you must go to the Constitution to really understand what the grand jury is supposed to do for Alaskans. When somebody says grand jury and the Constitution, many people would think, well, you'd find that in the part of the Constitution that details the court's authority,
right?
Or maybe you'd find it in the executive branch, because that's where the district attorney is. That's where the Department of Law is. Law enforcement. So maybe you'd find it there, but they'd be wrong. It's neither of those two places. The place that the grand jury is the power of the grand jury is put forward is in Article 1. It's in the Declaration of Rights for Alaskans. Section 8 is the one that talks about grand jury. And there are two things that this section is doing. Number one, it is telling Alaskans that they have a right to not be arrested. They have a right to have their freedom, to not have their freedom taken from them, unless a group of their peers, no less than 12, are going to agree that they need to be indicted, they need to be held accountable for a capital crime, an infamous crime. In our today's jargon, it's a felony. Okay, so if the prosecutor wants to charge you with a misdemeanor, they can do that. If law enforcement wants to charge you with a misdemeanor, they can do that. But if they want to charge you with a felony, they have to go to the grand jury, and a jury of our peers, 12 minimum. Court rules also stipulate 18, so it's somewhere in between. But usually, grand juries are 18 members, but minimum of 12. The second thing that the grand jury specifies in the Constitution is that the power of the grand jury to investigate and make recommendations, right? They're not a branch of the government, meaning they can't just make things happen, but they can investigate. And they're going to investigate about anything that is concerning the public welfare or safety and it specifically says that shall never be suspended. So there are two very specific, very detailed powers, one of which is depriving people of their liberty, and the other is investigating whatever the grand jury thinks that needs to be investigated that's concerning public welfare and safety.
Right.
Including the government.
Including that's the important part, right? Because that is the grand jury is the final step when you're checking in on government that we've given so much power to.
Yeah, so when you hear people talking about service on grand jury, this is the most important, in my opinion, it is the most important duty that a citizen can serve on, because you are the power that takes somebody's liberty away, or you're the power that looks into government and says, hey, this is not right. This is not the way that it should be. You are abusing your power. You are abusing our money, our resources, our tax dollars, and it needs to stop. And here we're going to issue a report. We're going to issue a document that details all of this findings, the truth as we see it, and we're going to issue it back out to the public so the public can see it. Now, why would that matter?
Well, hold on before we get into that.
We can get into that.
Yeah, we got a little bit of a late start, so we're going to jump into this. Into this break right now. We're talking with Ben Carpenter. He's coming on board with us this morning to talk about the grand jury, its role in Alaska, in the judiciary, in politics, in the government, and the potential that we've had and the accusations that we've had of abuse and malfeasance. And we're going to continue with this here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We continue in a moment with Ben Carpenter. Right after this, don't go anywhere. Back with more in just a moment.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Okay, Ben, first things first. I think you're talking on your camera mic instead of on your mic, because it sounds like you're far away. I can hear you and you're pretty clear, but it's not a microphone clear. So you may want to, I don't know if you can adjust in StreamYard your mic settings.
That could be what it is, because I'm watching my setting bounce here. I know I'm on my mic.
Yeah, so I would go to
see.
Use the little drop down there in StreamYard and go to your audio wheel and choose if you're using a Rodecaster or something, choose that instead of.
I don't see where I can change the settings in StreamYard.
Little three.
Yep, I've got remove from stage, edit name, edit avatar, stop mic cam.
You can't. Yep. Whatever you just did, I just lost your mic for a second there.
Yeah, I muted myself.
When you jump into StreamYard, it gives you the option to choose your settings. So maybe
can I jump out and jump back in?
Yep. I'll remove you, and then you can exit, and then when you rejoin, you can check that setting to make sure that it's listening to your microphone and not to the. We can live with it. It's just not quite as clear as I'd like. So there you go. And one way or the other, we'll get it. Let me go back to the people in the stream are saying that it's good. You'll probably have to leave the room, Ben. You'll probably have to leave and then rejoin to see that setting. Mark in the chat room says, outside of the subject matter, would like to have you or Ben interview a representative Oklo, which is the company that is manufacturing and designing that nuclear reactor, that test reactor that they're going to be putting on Eielson. And rest assured, Mark, I am working on that as we speak. I'm trying to get somebody on to talk with us about that for sure. So I am working on that as well. Let me go back to Ben here and see what we can come up with. You with me, Ben?
Yeah, I can hear you. Am I better?
Wow, so much better. So much better. All right. That was yeah. No, I noticed that the last time we talked, it was the same way. I don't know why, but it didn't like your it did not like whatever your setting was before, but this is great. So yeah, this is a big deal, Ben. Like I said, I remember two and a half years ago when we were talking about this, you were pretty concerned about it, although you weren't publicly facing, you weren't really talking about it much. In our conversation, this was something that was very worrying to you specifically, I think, because this is the one mechanism that we have via the Constitution to actually hold government accountable.
You're absolutely right. And it is something that, because people don't, well, two reasons. One, people don't serve on a grand jury but once every blue moon. And two, whatever happens in the grand jury is supposed to be secret. So even the membership of the grand jury, each time it meets, those members aren't, it's not brought out in the press or any other statement that says, hey, here's your grand jury members, go talk to them.
Right. Exactly.
So if you're not, you have no recourse but to trust the administration, trust the district attorney who has impaneled that grand jury. You have to trust them.
Yeah, and that's
to you. Then you're subject to their whims.
Well, and I think that's part of the problem, is the only instruction, because most people don't understand the function of the jury. The instructions coming from somebody who's inside the system can make it difficult to understand what your true duties are, especially if those duties are being obfuscated by the people who are supposed to be explaining it to you. And we can get into that here in just a second. We're 15 seconds from rejoining. Ben Carpenter is our guest. He is the host of the Must Read podcast, where you can find it wherever you find good podcasts. And of course, you can go to mustreadalaska.com to see some of the writings and everything else there. We're about to rejoin. And so let's get into it. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based. Free pickup radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, we're continuing now with former Representative Ben Carpenter, who's now the host of the Must Read podcast, which you can find wherever you find podcasts. And of course, you can find links to it at mustreadalaska.com. I was just saying, Ben, when we first started talking about this 2.5 years ago, you had a real concern, not necessarily publicly, but in our discussions about it, because I was trying to pick your brain on it, because the grand jury is the one constitutionally outlined power that the people have to hold government accountable. And part of that problem, of course, is that most people don't understand the process of the grand jury, or how it works, or what its functions are. And when you are impaneled on a grand jury, it's secret, it's quiet, and the people explaining it to you are part of the system that we're talking about, the same system that we're supposed to be a watchdog of as grand jury members. So continue on here with our discussion on this.
Yeah. So I think just for a brief pause on why I think it's important. If you look at a number of years ago, we had to repeal Senate Bill 91 and address our crime issue that was like an epidemic in the state.
Right.
Ever since then, and that was basically my first legislature, and we've had this thing that's been happening especially out in Western Alaska. This sexual assault epidemic is what I would call it happening.
Right.
Okay. Why are sexual assaults not being prosecuted like they should? That is 100% a safety and welfare issue that a grand jury should be asking questions about, in my opinion. It is definitely within the power of the grand jury to say, you know what, we've got all these sexual assaults that I mean, lots of people are saying, hey, they're not going to prosecute. Why? So this is one of the reasons. It's like, if you've got a problem with the way your government is working, you don't have to just accept it. You just have to have a grand jury go investigate, get the details, present a report, and then your legislature deals with it, or your executive branch deals with it. But the power is in the legislature to change the laws if they need to. So the number of your jurors that are serving on a jury, and this comes into the case here of what happened down in Kenai, is detailed in the law, in the statutes. The Constitution says 12. The statute says a grand jury shall consist of not less than 12, but no more than 18. So that's where you get your numbers that are able to be appointed in the grand jury. Well, what happened down here in this case, that a grand jury investigated, issued a report, and that report is still stuck with the court system. The courts have not released the report. We're going on almost 2 years now. Well, there were 12 members of the jury. That's what the court seated. And this was a case of the jury investigating the courts. One of those members disappeared. One of the grand jury members disappeared. Now, I have since had a conversation with the Attorney General, and he's assured me that they know who the juror is. They know where the juror is. The juror didn't die. They just never required the juror to come back, the grand juror to come back and finish the job like they should. So you've got a grand jury that did an investigation. They created a report. They followed the law. They followed their power, the constitutional power. They gave the report back to the court system, and the court's got rules that it's following and needs to be changed, by the way. But the court's following it, telling the court system what to do when they come up with a grand jury report. There's no rule in the court's rules that allows them to just sit on the grand jury report. But that's exactly what they're doing. The reason and the justification they say is, well, we don't have a grand jury to issue the report back to give the report back to, because we don't have 12 members.
Because we can't impanel the full jury because one's missing. Or
that's right. That's right. Except that you've got the power of the state to compel that individual to come back and finish their duty in the grand jury. You just request a law enforcement officer to go out and find that person and bring them back to the grand jury, because they have a sworn duty. When you go to sit on the grand jury, you're going to be sworn in. You have a sworn duty to finish the task at hand. You can't decide to not do it.
Right. You can't just quit halfway through. I mean, that's like, that's the thing with jury duty, regular jury duty, right? I mean, they can issue a bench warrant for your arrest if you don't show up for jury duty. You could get pulled over for a traffic stop and they'd be like, you got a warrant because you didn't show up for jury. I mean, it's a real deal. This is not an unknown thing.
If you've got issues, health issues or family issues or something that cause you to not be able to serve, then, or I mean, I guess if you just got a moral conviction that says, hey, I can't continue to serve, I suppose that the court's going to excuse you, because it would make it difficult to reach a conclusion. And that's why they are supposed to have alternates to fill in if and when something like that was to happen. So it's not exactly accurate to say that once you start, you can't stop and the state's going to force you to continue. I'm not making that case, and that's not pertinent here. What I'm suggesting is that there is an individual, and there should have been alternates, and that those two things, compelling that person to come back and having an alternate, that is something that should have been established at the beginning when you knew that the case was investigating yourself. Right.
Well, where's the alternates at this point? My question is, if they can't get the first one to come in, where are the alternates?
They're not there. And the justification for this, because it happened a couple of years ago, the justification that I was told was, well, this was coming out of COVID, and we didn't want to have the maximum number of people in the same room. We wanted to have the minimum number of people in the same room. This is for safety.
This is for safety. Again, and can you outline for us real quick before we get into the accusations here? Again, the power of the grand jury is to indict. But can you specifically get into the details of governmental oversight and court oversight? Because that's one of the main powers that is probably most unknown about the grand jury. I mean, people know about a grand juries being in debt for felonies and for criminal, things like that. But the actual governmental oversight component of it, can you walk us through that a bit?
Yeah, this is interesting because the Attorney General has put forward new guidelines on how they're going to address grand juries, and they are making a dividing line that isn't there with regard to power of grand jury. They look at the Constitution and they say, "Oh well, look, we've got an investigative grand jury and we've got a grand jury that does indictments, and you can't mix the two." But it doesn't say that anywhere. AS 12.40.060. There's I don't know, what is this, about 10 different statutes here that deal with grand juries. 12.40.10.010 is the first one. Anyway, .60 or .060 is access to public jails, prisons, and public records. So the statute created by the legislature to help further the constitutional authority of the grand jury says the grand jury is entitled to access at all reasonable times to the public jails and prisons, to offices pertaining to the courts of justice in the state, and to all other public offices, and to the examination of all public records in the state. So that power is statutorily derived. It's constitutionally derived and further backed up by the statutes. So then there's one other statute that I think is really key here, and that is the statutes that define what the purpose of the prosecuting attorney is. It literally says this is the duty of the prosecuting attorney. AS 12.40.070, duty of prosecuting attorney. And it has three basic duties. Number one is prosecuting attorney shall submit an indictment to the grand jury and cause evidence in support of the indictment to be brought before them in a case when a person is held to answer for a criminal charge in the court. So that's when somebody's been arrested and the law enforcement says, "Hey, we're charging you with a felony. Here's the information, district attorney, and you're now can make a decision as to whether you want to prosecute or not."
Right.
That's the normal operation, how you would think that the grand jury does things. Number two is when a law enforcement officer comes and says, "Hey, we've got this information on this person. We want to arrest them. Can you get an indictment?" And the district attorney brings the evidence to the grand jury, and it causes law enforcement to go out and arrest somebody because they've committed a crime. The third power is the one that's kind of being ignored. It says, shall, when required by the grand jury, prepare indictments or presentments for them and attend their sittings to advise them in relation to their duties or to examine witnesses in their presence. So if you're not following under the first two lines of authority or responsibility for the district attorney, now you've got a third one that says when the grand jury decides that they want to prepare an indictment, then that's your duty to follow through with the grand jury and help them issue this indictment. And this is the crux of the problem with the Department of Law right now. They do not want a grand jury to be able to indict or to investigate and to indict. They look at it as two separate issues. We cannot have investigations by a grand jury because they can go anywhere they want within state government, and they can't indict after that, because if they found something that would be bad, indictable, then there's no stopping them. So we cannot allow an investigation to go forward that might end in an indictment. That is the situation that's
right, and that's the real power, because once a grand jury is impaneled, and they're impaneled for a period of time. Once the grand jury is impaneled, then they can decide if there's nothing else, like if they don't have any criminal indictments or criminal prosecutions that they're making decisions for people who are already in custody, they can at that point decide that there is a matter that needs to be brought before themselves to take a look at it, right? I mean, again, governmental malfeasance or misconduct, those things can be brought forward by the grand jury. Doesn't have to have somebody to present that to them. If they discover something on their own, they have the ability to go investigate that.
That's exactly right. And I'm going to try to pull up the oath that you are given, that you have to take if you're going to serve in the grand jury. But I want to go back and point out one other thing. The district attorney and the courts they also have another constitutional provision that we want them to have in their front of their mind, and that is the concept of due process. So our Constitution says no person, right above, this is Section 7, due process. Section 8 is grand jury. It says no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The right of all persons to fair and just treatment in the course of legislative and executive investigations shall not be infringed. Doesn't say, by the way, doesn't say anything about grand jury investigations, but within legislative and executive investigations shall not be infringed. So the point is that they've got court rules, and we've got this system of due process set up, and the attorney general and district attorneys and the courts are saying, hey, this due process works for us. We don't want to mess that up because it would run afoul against the Constitution and against people. We don't want to be trampling on people's due process rights. So this is another reason why the Department of Law throws out this and say we can't have an investigative grand jury issue indictments because it's going to mess with people's due process. And where the rubber meets the road is, what if the grand jury had access to information that's not presentable in court? It's like hearsay. Right. Somebody brought that information to the grand jury, and then they made a decision to issue a true bill and indict somebody. Well, then they would have used information that was not admissible in court to come to that conclusion. And this is the lawyers are like saying, hey, well, we can't do that. That's not the way our system works. When you go to court, all of the information that's presented against somebody needs to be admissible under our rules. So the problem that we have is that the Department of Law does not want to do the additional work necessary to make sure that due process is maintained, the respect for due process is maintained, and grand juries are afforded the ability to investigate and indict. This is what requires more statute. It requires rethinking the process. It means that if the grand jury says, hey, we've just done this thorough investigation, we spent a day a year investigating, and we believe that there's evidence here that needs to be indicted, then that information needs to go back to the Department of Law. They need to take that information and go to a grand jury, a second grand jury, and present the information that is admissible in court, and have that grand jury back up the previous grand jury. Now, this is the fear factor that comes in, and I'm we boil this down to what a district attorneys don't want to see. They're like, oh well, we could have a runaway grand jury that they could it's just a snake eating its tail. Like you just hand them this information, and then they're going to go investigate, and then they find other information, and I can't tell them they can't investigate, and you just get this incalcitrance to do anything different than what we're doing.
Right. Well, they don't want to have the light shined on things that they can't control. Absolutely not. And you can go and maybe the second hour we should talk about what's going on with the Department of Law's changes that they want to make to I definitely want to get into that, but we're going to talk a little bit here about what I think is probably the precursor, the spark that kind of got us all driven on this, which is this discussion of the judicial investigator, who is the sole investigator in the state and yet has had thousands of complaints filed against her. That case came into court down here in the Homer area. And that was brought forward by the grand jury and has since been kind of suborned by the system. We're going to have a conversation on that here in just a moment. Ben Carpenter is our guest, The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We continue with Ben here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this with Ben Carpenter.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
All right, Ben Carpenter, our guest here on the program as we continue on here with this beautiful Monday morning. Brian found the oath here on the screen. You and each of you as members of this grand jury of the state of Alaska do solemnly swear or affirm that you will diligently inquire and true presentment make of all such matters as shall be given to you for consideration or shall otherwise come to your knowledge in connection with your present service. That you will preserve the secrecy required by law as to all proceedings had before you, and that you will present no one through envy, hatred, or malice, or leave anyone unrepresented through fear, affection, gain, reward, or hope thereof, and that you will present all things truly and impartially as they shall come to your knowledge according to the best of your understanding. That is the oath. And I think the important part is, or shall otherwise come to your knowledge in connection with your present service.
Yeah, why would the courts put that in there? If the grand jury's authority only came through what the district attorney or the judge gave them, why would you need that in there? You wouldn't.
Yeah. No, I mean, why would the framers and founders put that in there because that's a constitutional, I mean, that's part of the constitutional mandate. Why would it be, unless you're going to be spoon-fed, this is stuff that you bring unto yourself as part of the grand jury.
That's right.
Or somebody brings to the grand jury from outside the system, which is what we're going to get into here in just a moment, which is a big part of this. Ben, what's the most surprising thing you found as you started digging into this? What's the most surprising thing to you as you've found out more and discovered more and pulled back the curtain, so to speak, on the whole grand jury issue?
Well, that's easy. It is the simple fact that people don't want to deal with it. I guess they don't see it as important as I do. And I'm speaking of other legislators, of the executive branch, of people in general. It's surprising to me that people do not, like, they're not ready to upend their day, their life, to fix this problem. It is still just kind of on the fringes of the public's awareness. You can't get the legislature to prioritize any kind of activity to fix this problem. It is just on the edge. And I don't understand. I mean, that is what surprises me, is that Alaskans don't take it more seriously.
Well, because I think most Alaskans, here's the problem, Ben. Most Alaskans don't understand the pivotal importance of the grand jury. In their minds, the grand jury is really used for reasons number one and number two, right? Which is presentment and indictment of people who are either already, law enforcement's already aware of, who are already arrested, who are already in the system. In most people's minds, if they have ever thought about the grand jury or know about it, that's really what they know. They don't really know about the oversight component that that grand jury is a governmental watchdog on the administration, on the courts, and on law enforcement.
It is we the people. It is we the people involved in the day-to-day operations of our government. You've got representatives that go to the legislative branch. You've got employees that get detailed and employed in the judiciary. Judges get appointed through the legislative and judicial executive process. You've got some executives that get appointed, others like the governor elected, and then everybody else is an employee. The grand jury doesn't fall under any one of those three branches' authority, and yet all three of those branches have to deal with the grand jury, and that grand jury is made up of, every time it is impaneled, by citizens. It is the day-to-day operations of your government interacting with we the people. That's what it is.
Yeah, and I think if more people knew about, more people were aware of what the function is of the grand, we might have a little bit more care. But because they don't understand it, this is kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I suppose that is.
Can
It's
you hear me,
ignorant.
Ben?
I can. It looks like we've got some lag.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. I can hear you now. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think that's right. There's some ignorance. I definitely don't think that people, if they truly understood exactly what it is that they were that their power was, that they would be abdicating it as a decision, right? But they definitely don't understand where the power of the grand jury is.
Ben Carpenter is our guest. We're about to dive right back into this here. Please like and share the show. Like and follow the show page. Let's get everybody squared away. LD says, if it doesn't affect me right now, I can't be bothered. This mentality is what's killing this state and country. Alaskans could and should do better. I agree. All right, here we go. Jumping back in. Let's get it done.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
All right, Ben Carpenter is our guest. He is the host of the Must Read podcast, former representative here in the state of Alaska. All right, Ben, so we've kind of gone through some of the original, the origination and what the purpose of the grand jury is. We were just talking during the break about how, maybe the reason why there's not more impetus to keep it working, or maybe the impetus to try and slow it down is because most Alaskans don't understand what the function is. And hopefully we've outlined some of those things, why it's important that the grand jury is. But let's talk about how this first really came to light a couple of years ago, and the process, what's happened now in this. So what was your first exposure to this, and what really made you dig into this? What was the problem? What was the accusation? What was the potential malfeasance we're talking about?
Well, the first of many, a handful of people that I talked to was David Haig, who is familiar with Alaska news and Alaska's history. He was the one that brought this to my attention, and people that were championing his plight, his cause, of what happened to him back in the early 90s or late 90s. Anyway, it's decades now of issues that he has. And to be honest, whenever I talk to people in government about grand juries and David's name comes up, it's like like people tune me out. They're like, we don't want to talk about it. We're not interested in getting involved in that situation. And I've told David, I said, look, what has happened to you is wrong. And every time that I try to bring a conversation up that's dealing with your issue, I get there's a switch that gets turned off in people's brains that they don't want to deal with a grand jury issue, right, when your name comes up. So I have had to find a way to address the grand jury issue without making it David Haig's grand jury issue. And the issue is not just David Haig. And I told David this, it is much bigger than what your family had to go through. It is still going through, right? It's much bigger than that. And this is backed up by grand juries in down in the Panhandle, grand juries in Anchorage, and a similar vein has come up with other folks now. So this is why the issue is not just a Kenai issue; it is a statewide issue. There are a growing number of people who are being vocal about this because they recognize the abuses that's happening within the grand jury system. But my original exposure to this was through David Haig.
What are some of the accusations? Because again, as we look at this, and the more I've dug into it, the more it looks like there's a lot of protectionism going on, protecting the system as it stands, or protecting the people who are part of it. What is standing out to you? What is glaringly wrong? What are the accusations that Haig and others have made that apparently are not being taken seriously?
Well, one of the biggest issues that David has been trying to get people's attention to is that the investigator for the court system that would be investigating allegations of wrongdoing or corruption by the judiciary is the same person that has been the same person for decades. And the individual's name is Marla Greenstein. I am not today trying to cast aspersions on a particular person. I just need people to understand that when that name comes up, that's what it's affiliated with. The accusations that David has been making is that she is corrupt and that she knows where the skeletons are buried in this state. And you're not going to get an honest investigation, and you're not going to get an honest dealing with corruption from the judiciary's point of view until you've got a investigator that's impartial and not somebody who's been in that position. And I believe that that's kind of a good summary of what David's position is with regard to the court's investigator.
Because you have a single investigator, and any allegations of corruption against that single investigator is then investigated by the same investigator, right? Yes. I mean, that's part of the problem. There's no third party impartial investigatory branch or person that can look at the actions of this one person and say, this is the one person that's been, thousands of cases, thousands of investigations, and any complaints then go back to that person as well. So again, that's part of the problem, is you can't just have it with one person.
Well, there is, though. That's the thing that people, I mean, it's very easy to say that. Well, this is the courts, is a third branch of government. You can't have the other two branches investigating the courts. So who's going to do that? Is it the legislature that's going to investigate the courts, or is it the executive branch that's going to investigate the courts? I mean, what is it? Yeah. Now you've got a separation of powers issue, but that isn't the truth. The truth is that the grand jury fits right down in between all three of those branches and has the constitutional authority, responsibility, dare I say, to investigate. I mean, you look at the oath that the courts give the grand jury members that are impaneled. They have a responsibility to look into matters that they might know about, right?
Ben Carpenter is our guest. We're up against the break. We got more coming up. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Don't go anywhere. Yeah, it's one of the few times that Harold and I agree. The investigator investigate the investigators that investigated the investigator. That's kind of how it works. It's a circular firing squad. I mean, it's all, that's part of the problem. Where is that third party? And like you said, they may say, well, nobody else can investigate us because we're the third branch. No, that's not how it works. That's what the grand jury is supposed to be, right, Ben?
That's exactly it. By statute, they have access to all of the branches of government's information. That's it. You don't need to say anymore. Just the grand jury's coming in. It has questions. It's going to subpoena information, because that's the word we use. That's the process we use. It's going to require information. It'll compel you to come forward and answer questions. And it doesn't matter which government agency it is. That's what the grand jury's power is. And that investigate and do something about is what the lawyers in this state do not want.
Right.
They do not want. And I hate to go down this road, because it can be so pejorative, and I don't mean to be, but from a non-lawyer perspective, I have conversations with a couple individuals that are in high-powered positions. I feel like I'm being talked down to. I feel like I need to just, like the conversation is, you need to just trust me. Like we're the ones that are in the know.
Wait. We know better than you how this works. And so you should just shut up and sit down. That's kind of the answer.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I really do think, and this is, I mean, this is where the whole bureaucracy gets its I don't know, its disdain in my mind, is because I see this type of behavior from bureaucrats who are like, this is my self-licking ice cream cone. I exist to exist, and I don't need you pushing back on me. You're just a peon. You're just a member of the public. You don't have a title like I have, and you don't have the responsibility like I have. So you just need to let us do our thing.
Right.
Okay? That is the kind of the flavor that I get. And I don't think that it's any different than what you see coming from the education establishment as well. It is this concept that, we're educators. Like I've got degrees and I've got a pedigree and I've got a responsibility here. And I don't need you telling me how to do my job.
Right.
That's the attitude that's coming from bureaucracy. It's a nature of having your own fiefdom and not having accountability. Right. The grand jury is the accountability piece.
Right.
That's ultimate accountability for your state government.
Right. What outside of the Hague issue that you said there were some other ones, anything else that comes to mind of issues that the grand jury should be taking up or should have taken up or has been done incorrectly?
You're putting me on the spot. I know there are several other cases, and now I'm gonna get beat up because they're important, but they're not coming to the top of my head. I have never made the specific instances that I've never made those the problem. I've never focused on those because it's too easy to have a conversation that says, oh, well, that case has got specifics and we'll just brush it away. I have never, and this is, I told David, I'm not going to make David Haig's case my case. My case is on the fact that systemically we have a problem with what we're doing with grand juries, and it doesn't matter what case you bring forward. This is the systemic problem.
In your mind, and we'll ask this again here at the end of the program, but in your mind, what is how do we fix this? Right. I mean, if the legislature is indifferent, if the judiciary and the administration is kind of like, man, we like it the way it is, what is the solution here?
Well, I think that there are a couple statutes that need to be addressed, a couple changes that need to be made. I'll go back to this one, and I think that there needs some teeth put in. So AS 1240-090 is questioning juror for conduct. And it says a grand juror cannot be questioned for anything the juror may say or any vote the juror may give while acting as a grand juror in relation to any matter legally pending before the grand jury, except for a perjury of the juror, which may have been guilty in giving testimony before that jury. So we literally have one of our district attorneys pulled out a grand juror member from the pool of grand juries, sequestered them in a room by themselves, and grilled them on what they were talking to the grand jury about. There's no tooth to this statute. There's nothing that says if a district attorney does this, they will be subject to a misdemeanor or a felony obstruction. There's nothing there, right? So I think that the legal establishment needs to take tampering with the grand jury more seriously, and the only way that you're going to be able to do that is by changing the statute to have an actual crime and a penalty attached to it.
LD has another deeper thought here. He says, I think this goes deeper than most think. This is a purposeful erosion of basic constitutional tenets via ignorance or confusion, whether it be neutering grand juries, the Second Amendment is only for hunting, et cetera, et cetera. The legislature and executive branch have abdicated power to the judicial branch time and time again. I can't tell you how many times I've heard legislators say, we can't do that because the Department of Law says we can't. It's very dangerous and sad to watch. And I would agree with that.
I think that history proves that fairly accurate, fairly true.
Yeah. All right, we're getting ready to rejoin the radio. Hour 2 is dead ahead. Ben Carpenter is going to hang with us here. He's the host of the Must Read podcast, which you can find, well, wherever you find podcasts. And, of course, former representative as well. We're going to continue this in just a moment. The Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return in just a moment.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends. Welcome to Monday, hour 2 of the big radio show. Ben Carpenter continues with us. He's our guest. He's a former state representative and host now of the Must Read podcast, which you can find wherever you find podcasts. And of course, over on Must Read Alaska as well, mustreadalaska.com. We've been talking about the grand jury and some of the issues that we're having in the state here with the grand jury, what's going on with it. We just finished kind of talking up about the basis, the foundational principles behind the grand jury, what they're really intended for, and some of the things that are going on. Ben also talked about some of the changes that are happening in the grand jury and, some of the things that are being brought forward by the Attorney General, the Department of Law, et cetera, that kind of fly in the face of what we're talking about. So let's get back to it if we can here and jump on board. Ben Carpenter is our guest. Ben, thanks for sticking with us. I appreciate it.
Hey, it's good to be with you, Michael. This is an important topic, and I'm glad we can put some time towards it.
Yep. Well, we've now kind of gone through the basis for the grand jury, why it's there, what it is, its most important function. Well, I mean, it's got 3 major functions, but I think one of the most important functions that most people are not aware of is the watchdog component, keeping an eye on government, the investigatory powers of the grand jury in and of itself, that it can investigate whatever the hell it wants, essentially, which is not what most people are told. It's not what they're understood. And of course, part of that problem is it's the judiciary themselves who are supposed to educate the grand jury on their duties and on their rights and what they have the ability to do. And it seems, in my mind, on the outside looking in, again, just as a bystander, that when you've got the fox guarding the hen house, that could be a problem. When the people who are in charge of describing to the grand jury what they're supposed to be doing, definitely don't look at me, right? Don't investigate me. You could, but I'm not going to tell you that.
Yeah.
And now we've got even more challenges in that regard. Go ahead.
I think that the education component is, and this is where the kind of the rubber meets the road, is because the grand jury meets in the court, in the building, the court building, right? That's where they traditionally meet. There is nothing that says the grand jury must meet in the courtroom, in a room housed in the building that you have court, that you hold court in. There's nothing saying that they have to meet there. But that is traditionally, and that is where systemically our grand juries meet. And so it makes sense that the court has a role in educating the public. But I don't give the executive branch and the legislative branch a pass on this. They too have a responsibility because again, the grand jury is not it is not a baby of the court. It's not a baby of the legislature. It's not a baby of the executive branch. It stands alone. It is apart from all 3 branches. So all 3 branches have a responsibility to educate people from their perspective and how they touch the grand jury. They need to educate people on the power of the grand jury. And I hate to have to say this, but if we're going to play the victim card that says, hey, the courts aren't telling us, or the legislature's not telling us, we're the people. Like, we created this government. We ought to know. We ought to not rely upon our government to tell us what our power is. We ought to know it. All we got to do is read the Constitution, read the laws, and it's spelled out for you on what the power of the grand jury is and your responsibilities. So, yeah. I kind of got on the soapbox there.
No, that's and I think that's part of the problem is most people want to be spoon fed. It's like the pablum of tell me what I'm supposed to do now instead of looking at looking at the Constitution or looking at what they're doing. And it's not something that we're necessarily being taught or is being discussed in civics class. We don't discuss the roles of the grand jury in civics class. Maybe we should. Maybe that should be part of it.
If you want a governing class of people that know what government is supposed to do, and you want to sit back and not have to participate, well, then that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a governing class that looks down on you, that says, you don't know what you're talking about, because you don't.
Right.
Like, you're not empowering yourself.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, let's talk about some of the changes that have come out now recently. We're going to be talking with David Ignell later in the week about the grand juries down in the peninsula, or excuse me, in the Panhandle, because of some of the things that have been going on down there. But there's been a lot of changes, and there's been a lot of speculation as to why these changes have taken place. You mentioned a little bit earlier that they have kind of changed some of the definitions, and they've kind of created a fictitious boundary between different types of grand juries. Tell me some of the changes that you're seeing now that are not good in your perspective.
Okay, so you can look at this too. The public can go look at this. If you just Google Alaska Department of Law grand jury, it's going to come up with the State Department of Law's website, and the title is Investigative Grand Jury. It's the title of the webpage. And it's a newly created webpage. It is the Attorney General's attempt at solving a problem that is existing here with regard to the public's access to the grand jury. They are in their marketing and their interpretation of the Constitution and the statutes, right? They are drawing a line that says we have two grand juries. We have a criminal grand jury and we have an investigative grand jury. I've already read you the statutes, or at least the pertinent ones, and I read you the Constitution. There's nothing that defines a grand jury as you're going to serve on a criminal grand jury or you're going to serve on an investigative grand jury. There's not a distinction. When you take your oath at the courts, you're not taking an oath to one or the other. You're taking an oath for both. And you can't separate the power of the grand jury in this way. This is pure marketing. And then the reason that it's marketing is because they don't want grand jury members to be able to investigate into the government and indict, which I remind everybody, is a felony charge. It carries fines and jail time, right? It's a serious deprivation of liberty issue, right? So you scroll down, and the first thing that I'd like to highlight is the new website says the role of the Attorney General in investigative grand juries under Criminal Rule 6.1, and then it quotes a quote from the courts. It says decisions as to what to present to the grand jury. So what information is going to come before the grand jury, including whether to present a matter requested by a citizen to the grand jury for investigation, rests with the executive branch. It is up to the Attorney General or designee to review the matter and determine whether an investigation would be a valid and appropriate use of the grand jury's authority. Okay, so this comes from Supreme Court Order 1993. It's similar to an executive order that the governor would put out. The Supreme Court Order puts out executive orders that tell the court branch of government what to do. And the court comes back and says, oh, no, whenever a member of the public wants to address the grand jury, they have to go to the executive branch. Don't come to us. Go to the executive branch, and they'll tell you whether you can or not.
Right, you've got to get approval to have your investigation launched.
Exactly,
from the executive, from the judicial part of the executive, before you can come to us.
That's the enforcement branch, right? That's you've got law enforcement, you've got the district attorney, and that's the enforcement. So you got to go talk to them, right? nowhere in the Constitution and nowhere in the statute does it say that the public has to go to the executive branch. Now think about this. This whole website here is talking about investigative grand juries. If you're looking at it from the Department of Law's perspective, they're saying, and the quote here for Attorney General Craig Taylor is saying, the investigative, this is what we need. This is the problem we need to solve, because the Constitution says that reports should never be suspended, that the investigative power to investigate, the grand jury's power to investigate and issue reports should never be suspended. And the court says, well, people who want to investigate, go talk to the Attorney General.
Right. No,
we've got a specific case where the grand jury went and investigated. They issued a report, and the courts are the ones sitting on the report.
Right. Well, and that's one of the other things, is you mentioned it in there, is that the public, a member of the public, can go to the grand jury to say, we have this issue. This is an issue that I think is a problem, and you should investigate. And now you're saying that the public's right to have something investigated, and generally speaking, those kind of investigations are of a governmental nature. There's some kind of government overreach or something going on. Now you're saying you've got to go back to the government to beg permission to do the investigation again on itself.
Yeah. And if you scroll down, it's going to define, the website is going to try to define what is possible for you to bring forward. I'm trying to get the, for example, what does public welfare and safety actually mean? Mike, how much time we got before the next break?
We got about 4 minutes here.
4 minutes. Okay. I can get this in 4 minutes. So the public welfare or safety standard is what they're going to call it. And they're going to point this website and the Attorney General pointing to Supreme Court Order 1993. Again, for example, this is a quote from this. For example, systemic issues or an ongoing reoccurring issue impacting public welfare or safety could be within the scope of an investigative grand jury. But purely private matters, such as, for example, an investigation into any individual court case of any type, whether currently open or closed, or an investigation into the Department of Law's decision not to prosecute a particular incident as a crime, or an investigation into any private dispute between or among citizens that could appropriately be the basis for a civil or other court case, are not generally matters of public welfare or safety within the scope of the grand jury's investigative authority. So here's where I partially agree with the point where you've got two individuals battling it out, and it needs to be in the civil case. I agree that maybe the grand jury should not be getting involved in that. But right. When the court comes and says, oh, well, if you've got an individual case that you've got a problem with that we've decided, or that the district attorney's decided even not to bring, then grand jury can't investigate that. You can't investigate why we would make that decision. Right. Are you kidding me? This means that if you've got a whole series of court cases or an issue that has been brought to the attention of the courts or the executive branch multiple times, it by definition has to have individual cases, and you wouldn't be able to build a case of systemic corruption because each individual case couldn't be taken up by the grand jury. I mean, this is insanity. Right.
And that's interpretation. That's not constitutional. That's just this administration's interpretation of that.
It's exactly right. You've got this on the same page that says on the Attorney General's website, right? It's on the same page that says, hey, well, we can't suspend the grand jury's authority to investigate. And here the court, Supreme Court of 1993, is suspending their ability to investigate. Well, because we don't want it to be individual cases. Really?
Right.
So the Constitution backs that up and says, well, you've got the right to investigate, but not individual cases. You can't investigate that. It's not there.
Yeah. Well, and again, I'm trying to discuss, you said you had a conversation with the Attorney General. What's the justification for this demarcation, this invisible line between investigatory and indicting type grand juries? What's the reasoning for separating these out when heretofore, they were never separate? It was always the same. The grand jury was the grand jury, and they had all these powers. Why the differentiation now?
Well, there's the reason, and then there's the public reason. And the reason that's going to be brought forward as the, real day-to-day problem that's going to exist is that the grand jury, if it goes and investigates something and then it decides that something needs to be indicted, it's going to ask the district attorney to create the paperwork, create the file that's going to be the indictment. And then that district attorney would then have to add to their workload of things that they would need to prosecute somebody on. So if you imagine the normal flow of business that we have right now in the state, where law enforcement is doing investigations and they find a issue that needs an indictment, and they bring it to the district attorney, and the district attorney creates a packet of, your packet, your manila folder and all the papers that go with it and all that, right? That they're going to take to the grand jury. Now you would have a grand jury that says, oh, hey, we have an opinion too, and we want you to draw up an indictment for this particular issue, right? That is what they don't want. They do not want the grand jury to be adding to their
overload
overload of cases that are sitting on their desk.
I'm sorry that I ask you to do your job. I'm sorry that I ask you to do your job and make it harder for you and give you more work. I'm sorry that has to happen. But again, this is something that I've complained about in law enforcement for a long time, where they just would rather have all these pesky constitutional things out of the way because it would make their job a lot easier. It's not my job to make your job easier. Your job is supposed to protect the constitutional rights of your citizens. I don't care if it's harder. That's the job.
And I'm going to play devil's advocate for just a second. I'm going to point to the evidence that I see happening in the judicial system right now. And it is rare that you see the district attorney go all the way to trial. Most of the cases that come before the district attorney are pled. They plead out. They don't go to trial. I would make an argument that there might be some reason for why that's happening, and it is an overload. We don't have enough district attorneys in the state to deal with the mountain of cases that are coming before the district attorney. I'm gonna play the devil's advocate just a little bit. There's probably a reason, an argument for why I'm wrong, but I'm gonna say that the amount of money that we're spending, or the way that it's being allocated, doesn't lead to enough district attorneys to process the amount of data, the amount of demand that is out there. And the evidence of that is all of the cases that get pled out as opposed to actually taken to court. So right. If you're looking at it from a system that is overloaded right now, you don't, technically speaking, want the grand jury to be adding to the burden. And I think that's, from a practical matter, one of the considerations that the district attorneys are looking at.
Yeah, but the argument then becomes, well, what if there's a crime wave? What if there's a crime spree? Well, we just can't do that because it adds to our workload. But that's your job. But maybe we need to prioritize and put more district attorneys on. Maybe we need, if that's the case, then make an argument for more bodies if that's the case. But that is your job. We can't just shunt stuff off because it makes things harder. That's not how this thing's supposed to work. Ben Carpenter is our guest. We're going to continue the Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We return in just a moment.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Ben Carpenter is our guest on this. We're talking about the grand juries. Lisa and Gary, thank God I served on a grand jury in another state. This state has several issues. Miguel, I hope we've answered your question here. It says, can we, the people, request an outside entity to investigate this? I don't think we can. I think it's the grand jury that has to investigate. And unfortunately, Ben, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's being neutered by the same organization that it's empowered and impaneled to investigate.
The governor at this point in time is choosing not to appoint an independent investigator to investigate this issue. So yes, we can ask.
Yeah,
that's all you can do is ask.
Yeah, but the governor does have the power to appoint an independent investigation on this.
Yes.
Yeah. Laura says David Engel needs to be a guest on this very topic. David's going to be on the program on Thursday, and we're going to be talking about the situation in Southeast with the Ketchikan police chief and more, which includes components of the grand jury and the attorney general being zealous in prosecution of that. Let me see. It may be more about the unintended backlash, especially in a small populated state. Your thoughts on that, Ben?
Well, I would say backlash on a small population of lawyers in this state. This is a very small state, and there is a very close-knit group of lawyers, and the Bar Association has a lot of control and a lot of influence in this state. So I would say any sort of additional accountability with regard to how lawyers are conducting themselves in this state is definitely an issue.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. I think that the fact that, again, and I keep coming back to the same analogy, but again, the fox ruling the hen house. I mean, if he's making the rules, then, that's part of the problem. When the grand jury has to go to the district attorney to say, we'd like to investigate, for example, parts of the court system that the district attorney is integrally part of, and he has to decide whether that's a yay or nay, that's a problem. Because again, you can't have the guys with the keys being the ones that are making the decision on whether the investigation should move forward.
The majority of the members on the Judicial Council that are recommending recommending judges that the governor has to appoint, the majority of those members are members of the Bar Association. So the Bar Association has a outsized influence on the quality of our judicial system, our legal system.
Yeah, absolutely. And it needs, and again, that was not the intent. If you can go back and read the bare intent of what the Constitution says, and it's supposed to, all that power is supposed to lie within the grand jury. They're supposed to be the bosses. And the problem is that it's a lack of knowledge. It's a lack of education. I'm sure if a single juror stood up and said, hey, the Constitution says right here in article, yada, 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 that they'd be like, you're excused. Right. I mean, that's the thing. They wouldn't stand for that.
Supreme Court Order 1993 is saying, and this is what the Attorney General is pointing to, is that the public welfare standard or safety standard is an investigation of the issue is necessary to further public policy of the state, public policy. The outcome of the investigation could reasonably be expected to benefit many people, or the investigation of the issue is necessary because it involves a matter of general importance to many people rather than to a single individual or a small group of individuals. And what they're literally saying is this court has more understanding and a better understanding of what public welfare is than 12 to 18 members of the public is. We trust 12 to 18 members of the public to deprive an individual of their liberty and put them in jail by issuing an indictment, but we don't trust them to decide what should or shouldn't be investigated.
Well, breaking it down even further, we allow 12 members of a regular jury to decide whether to deprive somebody of their liberty or life, but instead we need the interpretation of somebody who's much higher up, to decide whether or not to investigate the government. And that's part of the problem. 10 seconds. We're getting ready to rejoin the Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Please like and share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the YouTube-y stuff. Let's get more people involved in this conversation. Here we go.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Dukes Show.
Continuing now, Ben Carpenter is our guest, former state rep, and now the host of the Must Read podcast, which you can find wherever you find great podcasts. And, of course, you can go over to mustreadalaska.com and find links there as well. So, Ben, what is the danger here? I want this next segment. I said, what is the danger of us just going along to get along or doing nothing at this point? What is the danger that you see in allowing the grand jury to be suborned by the Attorney General, the Department of Law, the administration, the Supreme Court. What is the danger here?
Well, you have to remember the Attorney General is not elected in the state of Alaska. They're appointed, right? So when the Attorney General puts forward a new ruling here, I say it's a ruling, it's an administrative process that he's put forward to help with investigative grand juries. And again, I just want people to understand, we're not talking about the Attorney General improving people's access to the grand jury to issue indictments. We're solely talking about the perception that I need to solve a problem of people's access to a grand jury to issue reports, right? That's the part that the Attorney General is doing. The risk and the danger here is that this new process leaves the Attorney General and the Department of Law as the gatekeeper for what information comes before a grand jury. Not to indict people, because they're never going to allow you to do that. Just to investigate, right? So the risk and the danger here is that whoever appoints the Attorney General controls basically what the Department of Law is going to prioritize, because the Attorney General issues the priorities for the Department of Law. So that's the risk. The risk is it seesaws back and forth on a political basis. It implements, implements is the right word. It implements political bias into this grand jury process that should be outside of politics. It should be reliant upon 12 to 18 members of our peers to decide what they want to investigate and where they want to investigate. That's the constitutional authority. That's the statutory authority. It doesn't need an interpretation by the sitting Attorney General, and it doesn't need new administrative processes. It just needs bureaucrats to enable the grand jury to do what it's supposed to do, which is investigate.
So is there a legal remedy for this? Is there a legal remedy to say, hey, Attorney General, your interpretation, first of all, as you just said, is not needed. It's very clear in the Constitution what's being said. Is there a legal remedy for the state? Is there a class action suit or something that could be brought up to say, hey, you're violating the power of the grand jury? I mean, what needs to happen in that regard?
Well, I've never participated in a class action lawsuit, so I don't know what the particulars are of that. My gut tells me that that's not going to be a particularly beneficial avenue to take. I think that this 100% is in the hands of the legislature through creation of law or modification of law, and that's who we have to hold accountable. The strongest branch of government is our legislature. They control the purse and they control the creation of the laws. We like to think that we have a real strong executive governor, and we do, but he still has to follow the laws. He doesn't get to change the laws. So the power is in the legislature. If you want your Department of Law to have side rails or to be required to do something, then you're going to have to put it in statute, and that requires the legislature to act. I believe that is probably where the right focus emphasis is.
A lot of us don't have true faith in the legislature is ignoring statute all the time, and with this new direction from the Attorney General and the Department of Law, it feels like even they are ignoring the way the statutes are written. So it feels like everybody's ignoring the law because it's inconvenient to them.
Yeah. The other aspect, or the other thing that you've got available to you as the public in general would be somewhat like a class action. It's putting a petition forward and changing the statute on your own. Having watched this happen with how we got ranked choice voting, would say that that's
Right.
probably a dangerous thing to go down with respect to grand juries, because I'm not sure how that would show up. But you can change the statute at the ballot box.
That's a dangerous and a slippery slope, especially on something as convoluted or as maybe not convoluted, but maybe as esoteric as a grand jury. I mean, you'd have to try and explain that to the public, and of course, definitely open to interpretation. And if you saw the amount of money that was flung around, for example, in the ranked choice voting thing, imagine what would happen if a ballot measure like that came up in the state. What the state bar, the national bars, the lawyer associate. I mean, if they could set a precedent to where they were basically untouchable, or had a gatekeeper there in place in the form of the district attorney or the attorney general, I mean, that could end badly for us in that regard.
Yeah. Well, the legislature is ignoring statutes at when they come to appropriations. It is clear that the Department of Law is ignoring statutes when they come to grand juries. I spoke about this in the first hour. The statute literally says a grand juror cannot be questioned for anything the juror may say or any vote the juror may give while acting as a grand juror in relation to a matter that's legally pending before the grand jury. And that is literally what happened. Our district attorney at the very highest level, in charge of the criminal division, reached down in to a specific grand jury, a foreman on a grand jury, sequestered them in an individual room and grilled them on what they were trying to talk to the grand jury about. So they're going to part. They're going to part.
What was the justification for that? I mean, is there? You said that there's no real penalty for it, but I mean, what was the justification? What was the reasoning to say, "Oh, this is why I did this because of X reason"? Was there a reason given, or
the reason is because we don't have control over what's being presented. If you're presenting information that's going to taint the grand jury, their outcome, then it throws our case of whatever's going on that day. It throws it into imbalance. It may bring in information that's not admissible in court. So it's a control issue. I think it's further just self-protection. They do not want a grand jury being able to investigate and indict. So they have to know what information is being talked about at the grand jury level. The district attorney does. If they're going to control the outcome of what's happening in the grand jury, they have to control the inputs to what is available to the grand jury. Like if you've served on a grand jury, you can tell the district attorney, hey, we want more information in this other area. But the only reason that you would ask that is that it seems pertinent to ask that question because the district attorney has presented you with a case, a folder with information that you're going to look through. You're going to read the papers. You're going to draw your own conclusions. You're going to ask, hey, I've got some questions. So the grand jury is only dealing with what's presented to them.
Right.
The district attorney doesn't want somebody else bringing in another packet of information that they haven't seen, that the district attorney hasn't seen, and plopping it down on the table and saying, here, I want you to look through this. And do you have questions if you read this? And if you do, will you choose to investigate? And if a majority of the grand jury says, yeah, I think we should investigate this, the district attorney doesn't know anything about it.
And so they're out of the power loop. What about we're coming up on the break here, but it sounds like the grand juries need their own attorney. It seems like they need to have an attorney assigned to them, one attorney that does nothing but grand jury stuff to keep, maybe, and they'd still be part of the system. But if they were independent in the way of your one job is to take whatever the current grand jury that's impaneled is and to answer their question or work for them or do whatever, that would seem like that would be a possible solution. What do you think?
Yeah, you're thinking about somebody independent from the district attorney's office, because statute right now gives the district attorney the responsibility. It is their duty, when required by the grand jury, to prepare indictments or presentments for them and attend their sittings to advise them in relation to their duties or to examine witnesses in their presence. So the district attorney, when the grand jury says, hey, I got questions, the district attorney can't just say, oh, time out. I'm on break. I'm not going to be able to help you on this. It's their duty to be there in the presence, but are they impartial? Are they independent?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and obviously that's where the mistrust comes in. Because it appears, again, the appearance of impropriety in and of itself is troubling, but it appears that they are protecting their own self-interest or the interests of the court system, the legal system, instead of allowing the grand jury to do what they need to do. Ben Carpenter is our guest. We're coming up on the final break. This has been the fastest show ever. We're going to continue here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just a moment with Ben Carpenter. One final segment dead ahead. We return in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Ben Carpenter is our guest. That was an interesting question from Frank. He says, Ben, how much time has been spent on this issue? How much time have you? I know you've been, again, we first started talking about this a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago. How much time have you spent digging into this where most people probably wouldn't have spent that time?
I can't even offer an estimate of time. A lot. A lot. I mean, I was like everybody else when I first got into the legislature. I didn't know what a grand jury was. I didn't know what the power was, what they do, what the requirements are, what the laws say. I didn't know any of that. I'm just like the public. That's why I feel really, really good. I feel like I understand what the problems are here, the perspectives, because I was you. I've never served on a grand jury, so I don't know from my own personal experience. All I've done is the investigating piece of this to educate myself on what's going on. I look at what's happened with the grand jury, the investigative grand jury website from the Department of Law, and I say, well, that's great. That's the executive branch, the Attorney General's opinion, but we shouldn't be operating grand juries just based on their opinion.
Right.
Like, what happens when this bumps up against statute? Statute should trump it, right? Because this is just administrative opinion. When the court order, Supreme Court Order 1993 is issued, or some Supreme Court order, that's only good through the judicial branch. If it bumps up against statute, then it has to defer to statute.
Yeah, or the Constitution, right?
So yeah, exactly. And I look to the investigative grand jury process that the Attorney General has laid out, and I say, well, that should inform the legislature. This next session, they should take up this process that he's created and decide whether we agree or disagree with that process. And if we disagree, then we need to create statute that corrects the direction of the executive branch, because that's the responsibility of the legislature.
Well, the problem with that is it's not sexy. This is not a sexy bill. This doesn't give somebody money. This doesn't provide a service. This doesn't do anything else. Nobody wants to touch that with a 1,000,000-foot pole. That's true. That's true. I think it's sexy within the conservative circles. Well, sure,
But
yeah.
Not in the larger sense. And it's going to be a messy conversation. And you boil it down at the end of the day, if the courts or the legal profession itself is going to lose power because of this grand jury issue, then it's going to be a battle royale. They are not going to want statute put forward in the legislature that reduces the control that is currently in place over our legal system.
You said previously that you had a conversation with the Attorney General in regards to this. Can you recap that for us overall?
The conversation that I was referring to was a brief conversation that I had at the Alaska Sustainable Energy Conference here a few weeks ago. And it was just limited to Attorney General Taylor informing me that he had created this process and that it would be made public here very soon. That's the conversation that I was in, that I was referring to earlier. It wasn't a very detailed or well thought out conversation. I know that the Attorney General, all these attorneys and generals and districts, and the words get confusing sometimes. Or hard to keep them straight. The Attorney General, I believe, truly wants to address this issue, but he's looking at it from a perspective that says, well, I've got responsibility for this system, and I need to maintain the system, and that comes with maintaining order and power and control over the bureaucracy. And knowing that that's his responsibility means he's not likely going to give up power and authority. That would just reduce his control.
Right. Jeannie says the 12th juror is known and they didn't call him or her back, thereby intentionally sacking the case. I mean, that you said that they told you that they know who it is. What's the justification for not going out there and yoinking them back in and finishing this up?
Yeah, I didn't get a justification from the Attorney General. I can only imagine that it's we really don't want to have the report released, and therefore, until someone forces us, until the court of public opinion forces us to deal with this, we're not going to. That's what I think. But I don't have any proof for any other reason. I mean, I don't know why the 12th juror didn't come back. I mean, there's information I don't have. So,
right. Well, we'll continue on here. Again, Ben Carpenter is our guest. One final segment here. Please like and share. We should be sharing the show across the state so that people understand what the process is with a grand jury, why it's important, and how it's being suborned right now. We definitely need to do this. We're going to continue here. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Let's do this thing. Again, don't forget to like and share YouTube things, all that. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Yeah. Whatever. All right, let's continue on here. Ben Carpenter is our guest. We are continuing our discussion on the grand juries and the role in government that the grand jury plays, and how that is being suborned by the administration, by the judiciary, by the Department of Law, the Attorney General. I mean, all these things are all coming down to it. Again, the fox guarding the hen house at this point. And so my question is, Ben, what can we do? During one of the breaks, we were talking about the governor has the power to appoint an independent investigator. The governor's not done that. So, but I mean, what do we as citizenry, what do we need to do on this? Aside from first things first, I guess, educating ourselves on what the grand jury does. What's the solution here in your mind?
If you want an advocate for you in improving the government, both from an efficiency perspective, meaning we're getting what we pay for, and from a corruption perspective, meaning we've got people making immoral decisions or wrong decisions. If you want an advocate for you, there is no better advocate than the grand jury. No better system that we have, right? You got 12 to 18 members of the public who would do investigations on their own on matters concerning welfare, public welfare. Okay. If you do not voice your opinion through the election process, you have a great opportunity, because the gubernatorial race, the race for governor is coming here very shortly. The governor appoints the attorney general. So if you do not voice your opinion as we the people with regard to addressing this grand jury issue, if you do not make it an issue for the election cycle, then whoever wins is going to make the decisions that they're going to make, whether it's change or whether it's continue the status quo. So in a real sense, the timing is now. You have to get involved. You have to, like, all I can say is that the information that I started reading 7 years ago on this grand jury issue is all public information. You just look at the Constitution, you just search out the statutes, you just look at the court orders. They're all online. It's all public information, and draw your own conclusions. What do you want as a potential member of the grand jury? Okay. Right now, the Department of Law and the judiciary are making their best attempt at dealing with what can be a messy issue, which is this grand jury issue. I would bet that none of the Attorney General or the Supreme Court doesn't really want to have their hands on this, because it's not a authority of either of those branches constitutionally. It's individual rights, and from left to right in the political sphere, they're going to piss somebody off with how they do this, right? Some people want the grand jury to have more power, some want less, and so it's messy. They're doing their best. So when I'm looking at what the Attorney General has said, and on this website, he is taking his attempt and following along with what the Supreme Court Order 1993 did, and saying, well, we're going to define what public welfare is. We're not going to trust 12 to 18 members of our public to define what public welfare or safety is. We're not going to trust that. We're going to create some rules that says when you get impaneled and you get sworn in as a grand jury member, you got to follow these rules because we created them. Okay. We don't trust that you can make a decision about who to investigate or issue reports about. We don't trust that. So we're going to put sideboards on that. Okay. But the Constitution is very clear that sideboards don't exist. You cannot suspend the ability of a grand jury to investigate in this state. But this is exactly what they're trying to do, is kind of like quasi-suspended or suspended in particular instances when we really don't agree with where you could go with that. So you have to weigh in. There's no substitution for members of the public putting on hold their private interests, their selfish private interests, and getting involved here. There's no substitute for it.
And this is a question, as you said, that we should be asking to candidates, especially gubernatorial candidates. Will they impanel what's the question? Should it be, will you impanel an independent investigation into what's going on with the grand juries? Is that the question? Or
that gets the ball rolling. And I think if you made it more specific, will you create an independent investigation into why the grand jury report has not been released from the judiciary? Because this is the smoking gun.
Right.
This is the constitutional authority of the grand jury to issue reports, and the courts are sitting on it because that investigation likely is going to shine the light on the judiciary system.
Right.
They're sitting on it. They're not allowing that report to come forward. It is unconstitutional. They're going to sit on it as long as they can, and somebody's not going to force them to release the report. And I like the next grand jury that gets impaneled could say, hey, you know what? I've got an issue. There's a report that has not been released from a previous grand jury. We'd like to investigate why that report has not been released. And so we're going to conduct an investigation on that investigation. And that should bring forward that grand jury's report.
Except that they have to go to the district attorney to say, is this okay for us to investigate? And the district attorney will say, well, no, you can't. Right? I mean, this is the self-licking ice cream cone you were talking about earlier. I mean,
this is exactly the problem that we've got. If the members of the grand jury do not know their own authority, then they can be led astray. They can be told, well, you don't have that authority by the district attorney. You have to know, as a member of a grand jury, that your constitutional authority is to investigate anything you want to investigate within government, as long as it's public information. Here's a case in point of non-public information, right? This report is not public.
Well, and this is part of a disturbing trend, Ben. This is part of a disturbing trend. We just went through this with that report from the Division of Elections that was sat on and redacted for 5 years before they ultimately rolled it out. You and I talked about it here on the program, and it didn't have a lot of, it had a few things in it for sure, but they were like, they were redacting things that made no sense and nothing else. This is part of a disturbing trend where they are basically cutting the public out of the process and making it less transparent as we go forward.
Yeah, you're right. You bring up the what's colloquially known as the Chewbacca report with regard to elections and election integrity. And you're right. The executive branch exercised their authority to release the report with redacted versions, which included redacting every single word of the two or three pages of recommendations, so that the public had no idea what recommendations were actually made. A grand jury would have been able to investigate that and bring that information to light a lot sooner than what was actually able to be released years later. That's a case in point, or an example of something that the grand jury would be.
Not even tying the grand jury to that report. I'm just saying, in general, these kind of things, the court report now is being suppressed. The DOE report was suppressed. It seems like more and more we're seeing where we get these reports and then nothing happens with them, or they sweep them under the rug for 2 or 3 or 4 years until the heat wears off, and then they can release it at a time of their choosing versus at the public's convenience, which is what this is supposed to be about.
Yeah. You want to get down and personal about something? We just had a automobile accident in our family, and everybody's fine. There's no injuries, but in the process of dealing with the insurance company, we've got this individual who was the other part of this accident, has a decades long history every year of getting a tick on their record for not having a driver's license and not having insurance.
Right.
So this insurance issue is all mine. It is all our family to have to deal with. And the insurance company needs a police report. And the police report has now not been filed for 3 weeks. Okay. So I start digging in, and I'm like, okay, well, what does the statute say? I deal with the Department of Public Safety, and they're quoting statute to me. And I said, okay, what's the statute say? 24 hours. That's what the law enforcement officer has to produce a report to the Department of Administration. 24 hours by law.
Ignoring the statute yet again.
Right? So as long as we, the people, don't know what the statutes say, and we can't hold our government accountable through the processes that we have, if we just back up and say, oh, yeah, out of my ignorance, I don't know what it is, and it's just too hard, and I'm not going to do it, and what can one person do? If we take that path, then we get what we get.
Well, again, as I just said, another example of statutes just being ignored because it's inconvenient. Well, my workload, where am I this, where am I that? It's inconvenient. Statute, again, being ignored, and us allowing it to be ignored because we're ignorant of the statute, which I think is your key point there for sure. Ben Carpenter, dang, that was the fastest 2 hours in radio. We are out of time. We got more coming up tomorrow. Brad Keithley, Chris Story. On Wednesday, the Alaska Peony Co-op. And then on Thursday, David Ignell will join us to talk more about grand juries in Southeast and what happened down there. We'll be back with more tomorrow. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll see you then. Have a great day. All right, Ben. Final bite at the apple here. This is, again, that what you just laid out there is an example of, this is getting to the point now to where we're just willy-nilly ignoring the laws, the rules, the procedures, the statutes, the regulations. Just ignoring them because it's inconvenient for us, which is what we hear a lot of time. And this is not strictly a legislative problem at this point, as you just pointed out. It's supposed to be 24 hours. It's been 3 weeks.
Yeah. This is a case in point of the bureaucracy busting at the seams. The evidence is that our bureaucracy is busting at the seams. It's not being run efficiently or effectively. These are the things that I see as evidence of that, right? So you got to then take a step back and say, why in the world is it taking Department of and I've oversimplified the situation that happened with the Department of Public Safety for sake of the radio time that we have available. But the suffice it to say that employees don't know what they're doing. I got the runaround from 3 different people before I actually found the answer. Right. So
right.
we have to stay involved with our government. Like you cannot choose fishing and living a lifestyle of exploration and having fun to the exclusion of participating in your government and knowing what's right. You cannot do that. You will end up with a government that runs amok. And that's the evidence that we have in this state. Maybe more so in the state of Alaska because it's so small. It's population wise, it's so small. The power is concentrated into a more diluted number of people.
Right. Well, remember, it's government is what happens to you when you're not paying attention.
That's
good
adage.
I mean, that's it right there. Government is what happens to you when you're not paying attention. You get exactly what you paid attention to. And if people are more concerned about what's on must-see TV Thursday than they are about their own rights or the laws or how things are done. I got a question for you, just out of curiosity. When you brought this forward to them and said, hey, it's supposed to be 24 hours. What's the holdup? What was there a reaction? They just didn't know? Or, I mean, what's...
So, you know what? I haven't checked my email this morning. I did point that out to them, and I don't have an answer for you.
Okay. I was just curious because, again, this is a troubling, the more I hear about things like this, it is a troubling trend to see the legislature, the judiciary, the administration, the public safety branches just ignore. I mean, it brings me back to the point to ask the question, do we have too many laws? If that's what it's coming down to, you can't pay attention to them all, or is it just the inconvenience of it? Again, I'm sorry. It's not my job to make your job easier. You accepted this job. If it's harder, I'm sorry. That's just the way it is.
Well, in this most recent case, I know we're up a short time here, but this most recent case, we're talking about a routine matter. Automobile accidents happen. If there's a non-injury accident, I mean, how many of those happen in a day across the state, right? If it's over $2,000 worth of damage, we as citizens are required to call law enforcement to investigate. We're required by statute. Okay. So now I have to involve this bureaucracy that is going to take forever. And if I'm going to have to go to my insurance company, then I need the result from that bureaucracy. Okay. I talked to the first person. They told me I had to call somebody else. I talked to the other person, the next person that I was referred to, and they said, well, you have to go to the website. So I filed the information on the website, and then I find out that a fourth person is now going to have to pull my information up. And every single person that I'd talked to thus far had to pull the information up. They were looking at it on their computer. The information that I needed was on their computer. The first and the second person could have told me that the law enforcement officer has not finished his report yet. It was the third person that actually told me, oh, well, the investigation is not complete. He hasn't filed his report. So it's a evidence of the bureaucracy is not functioning properly.
Right. Too much bureaucracy. I would argue too much bureaucracy at some point. I mean, it's too much. One hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing.
And you know, maybe my lens of life is colored a little bit by the 21 years that I spent in the Department of Defense in various fashions, right? That's a huge bureaucracy. I wish people would just understand and believe that when you talk about government, you talk about inefficiency. It's not yes or no, it's varying degrees. Okay. Right. It's always going to be inefficient, but to what degree? And if you're just assuming that things are going to be done over time, it gets less efficient. And that's where we find ourselves in our state government. We have just abdicated our roles to a certain extent of watchdogging our government, of being pissed off when there's things that are wrong. We just, oh, you know what? I got to go. We got a fishing trip next week and I just don't have the time to deal with this. And we're going to go. And I hate picking on the fishermen. That's not my beef here.
The hunters have got their own little cat.
It's a synonym for people who've got a self-centered lifestyle that doesn't include time spent with making sure that your government is responsive to you.
Right.
You have a season in life and you have to do that. And if you're retiring, going to put a plug in here. This is going to piss some people off. If you're retiring and you've never served in your government in some fashion, you're part of the problem.
Right.
You've got time on your hand and you're going to go do you to the exclusion of us.
Well, it's like my grandfather used to say, politics is a participatory sport. You have to participate in one form or another. Doesn't mean you have to run, but you have to at least be educated. You have to be part of it. You have to be involved. And again, because if you don't, you're going to get exactly what you didn't want because you're not paying attention. And that's what this is all about right here. This is a fascinating topic. And again, the power of the grand jury in this state is so important and so vast. To watch it be intentionally diluted by the powers that be is infuriating. And of course, we have very little control over that. That's why we must be asking our potential elected officials, candidates, and everything else, if they're going to take this issue on. And again, not including any names, not putting any specific cases to it, but just asking the question, where's the report? Will you impanel an independent investigator to find out where this report is? Will you impanel an independent attorney to support grand juries? I mean, will you put, I mean, that would solve a lot of the problems. If that was the case, one attorney in each area that does nothing but support the grand juries outside the chain of the Department of Law. Well, I mean, that would make sense to me.
This last grand jury that issued the report was detailed a public servant, an attorney to be independent. And that attorney a decade previous was involved in the case that was being investigated, David Haig's case specifically, and where there was a recommendation to not investigate. So
right. Yeah, I don't think
we have a broken system and we need people to get engaged to fix it. That is all I can say.
Ben, we appreciate you coming on board and talking about this. The big question I've seen 5 or 6 times this morning, and I'm going to ask it, put you on the spot. Are you going to run for office anymore, Ben? Are you going to run for office anymore, or are you?
I haven't decided yet.
I haven't decided yet. I'll my answer, and you can feel free to steal this or co-opt it. My answer was always, I feel like now that I have a voice, I can do more good on the outside than I can on the inside. And now you've got a voice with the Must Read podcast. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's a direction you can go as well. But because again, having to work with 60 other yahoos out there, 59 in the governor, can't be easy. I can't imagine that's an easy road to hoe. So, all right, Ben, thank you so much for coming on board. We appreciate you being part of it today, spending the whole 2 hours with us. We love that.
Always a pleasure.
All right. Thanks so much. Ben Carpenter, our guest. That does it for us today, my friends. We are out of time. Tomorrow, Chris Story, Brad Keithley. It's going to be fun. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.
Bye.